Hey folks, Nathan P. Butler here with another of our content overview videos, only this time it's going to be a little bit unusual in the format that we take. The game we're looking at here is Star Trek Star Realms from UVS Games, best known for Universes and other licensed IP types of games, and Wise Wizard Games, who of course created the original Star Realms deck building game, Hero Realms, Sorcerer, and so on. We actually looked at Sorcerer in depth relatively recently here. What has happened in this case is essentially Wise Wizard Games has licensed out Star Realms to UVS so they could create a licensed property version of Star Realms called Star Trek Star Realms, which is an awkward name to say the least, but accurate at least. Because essentially all this is a Star Trek reskin of the original base game of Star Realms. There are some very slight component differences and whatnot. We're going to look at them here. But my plan here is to go through and not just show you what is in this box here so you know what will be coming out in September, late September of 2024, or what was released in limited supplies at Gen Con, which is where this copy came from, but instead to show you how this parallels the original set. And in doing so, my hope is this will be useful to new people coming in just for Star Trek Star Realms, but also to those who play Star Realms, because it might help in developing strategies and getting into Star Trek Star Realms to know which cards correspond between them. A lot of longtime Star Realms players already have some strategies built around certain cards they always want to try to get or play together if they can when playing with the original base set. If you know which cards from here are tied into the cards from here, that will help you immediately, if you are one of those players, start strategizing for Star Trek Star Realms. So, kind of an oddball here. We do have a Star Realms mat behind us. We will see what actually comes in the box for Star Trek Star Realms here in a moment. But again, this is comparable to the original Star Realms boxed set, with copyright dates of 2013 on the original printing, which was actually put out in 2014 after Kickstarter fulfillment. So just be aware, if you're getting Star Trek Star Realms, it is effectively this with the reskin. So we have Star Trek Star Realms, UVS Games, Wise Wizard Games, a deck building game, Star Trek Star Realms. On this side, the two company logos, the title again, the four factions that are going to be in this game. We're going to see the Federation, the Klingons, the Romulans, and the Dominion. 2 to 4 players, 14 plus age, and 20-minute playtime. And yes, it is 2 to 4 players. There are some base sets that you can get for Star Realms, just regular Star Realms, that do play solo because they have those solo co-op challenge cards and such. This does not. There is no solo or cooperative play available in Star Trek Star Realms yet. Title again, and essentially the same stuff here, just reorganized, kind of mirrored there. The back of the box lays it out for us. Star Trek Star Realms. Forge a Federation, or see it burn. Maybe. I mean, the Federation's already been forged. I mean, that was like end of Enterprise kind of stuff. You're not really forging a new Federation here, but whatever. Star Trek Star Realms is a complete starship combat deck building game for 2 to 4 players. I'm going to rewind here and say that I think that's a little bit of a misnomer. If you've never played Star Realms, the idea is that the ships that you're playing to do basically everything, almost everything in any of these games, is either a base or it is a ship in one form or another. And they're not really attacking each other. There is no direct ship-to-ship combat. Instead, you are trying to whittle down the authority, which is essentially the life of the other side, with the actions of your ships. If you want ship-to-ship combat in a deck-building game, you probably need something like Solar Titans or The Last Command. But I digress. Kind of. Build your fleet. Romulan, Klingon, Dominion, and Federation ships are yours to command. Play head-to-head or up to 4 players in multiplayer modes that offer versus and cooperative experiences. Again, cooperative sort of 1v many. We will take a look at the variants when we get to that point. Contains 130 game cards, 20 cards for each faction, Federation, Romulan, Klingon, and Dominion. 50 unaligned cards, that's your starter and always available cards. Authority counters, instead of cards in this case. 1 2-player game mat, they call it a mat, loosely defined I suppose, and full color rulebook. Websites and stuff, various company icons and the Star Trek logo, copyright, UPC, all that good stuff. Now before we go any further, let me note here what is inside the box. as far as organization goes, it's just this. It's a cardboard little insert. Kind of neat that they make it so that if you look at it this way, it's the Enterprise D. That's nice here. But it is just a standard cardboard insert. It's about as functional as any you'd find in like a Fantasy Flight Games game. And of course, you got so many cards that if you put them in here as a stack and here as a stack, which is how they come in the shrink wrap, they're all going to get mixed up when you're actually storing this thing away. So my suggestion would be, if you're going to use this, perhaps create your own little divider, like maybe take a piece of cardboard and fold it to stick up so you can keep your decks separate. Put them in little deck containers, but then they won't fit width-wise. You'd have to find something smaller than the ones that I'm using, or do like I'm doing and just chuck the insert. Now, as I mentioned, the game says it does come with a mat. And when we talk about mats with Star Realms, we're used to these neoprene mats, or we're used to a fold-out, thick cardboard game board like they have in the newer Star Realms box set, which also repackages without reskinning that original Star Realms game. That is not what this is. It's a mat in terms of organizational purposes, but it is just cardstock. So you have this little fold-out cardstock board here. Okay, and of course, by being folded, you do have to kind of fold it a couple of times to get it to eventually lay flat. But what you have here is what you would expect, I think. You have your 5 slots for your trade row. You have a place for your always available card, which in this case is the Decora class Ferengi vessel. You have a place for your trade deck and your scrap pile. And then you actually have some pretty helpful turn phase information down here and explanations for the different symbols for authority, combat, trade, scrap, defense, and outpost. Then you have the logos and your legalese down there on one of the corners. So useful for organization. I would love to have seen this with some Star Realms base sets, aside from that one newer box set that is a repackage. That said, don't go into this thinking that it's a board like in that box set repackage of the original Star Realms, or you will be disappointed. It's just cardstock. Then we have our rulebook here, Star Trek Star Realms, company names, rulebook. The back is a nice handy reference with the turn structure and the iconography, although again, it's basically here, minus the main phase part here that goes into a little bit more depth. Nicely laid out, bigger than any of the Star Realms ones from the original releases at least. And here's where it talks about those other formats. Okay, so for variants, you have 3 to 6 player variants. You have a free-for-all for 3 to 4, Hunter for 3 to 6, Hunter First Blood also 3 to 6, and then Hydra for 4 or 6 as 2v2 or 3v3. These should all sound pretty familiar to Star Realms players. And then you have this one that is the one that they refer to as cooperative, but it's not. It's a 1v mini. It's 3 to 6 players with 1 boss and 2 to 5 raiders, where 1 player is playing the boss. So it's a little bit more like playing against one of the boss decks in, you know, Hero Realms than it is actually playing any type of cooperative game. And even then, it's not a unique boss deck like it is in Hero Realms. It's just 1 player playing as the boss. Cool, and I'm glad they included them, but don't take that line about cooperative play to heart as this being a game you can actually play cooperatively or even multi-handed solo, because there must be an adversary to play against. You may recall that for the original Star Realms, you had a 2-player rule fold-out that's double-sided and a multiplayer rule fold-out that's double-sided. No actual rule book, per se. Also, in the original Star Realms, keeping track of your authority, essentially the health of your empire, was up to these score cards. You have 10s with 20s on the other side, and then 5s with 1s on the other side. For Star Trek Star Realms, you have authority tokens. Quite a few of them. No, they don't give you a bag or anything to store them in. You just punch them out, and I guess they're supposed to let them be loose inside the box. They come in 3 varieties. You've got 33 1 authority tokens. You have 15 5 authority tokens, and you have 25 that are 10 on one side, 20 on the other. These are just the same on both sides. It's only the 10s, 20s that flip. Now, I've gone ahead and removed the little mat for this particular game out of the way here, so I can just use the regular Star Realms mat as a means of making it easier for us to make these comparisons as we look at all the future cards here. So if you played Star Realms, you are familiar with the cards that are in your starting deck, the Scout and the Viper, and the always available card, which is the Explorer. And the way that it worked basically was they just took the abilities one for one and the costs one for one and translated them over, reskinning them from the original Star Realms base game, in this case really for any Star Realms game, into Star Trek Star Realms. So the Scout became the Scout ship, which is a Regillian Scout, I believe from Enterprise, if I'm remembering correctly here. And the Regillian Scout, you know, any of these cards have an actual image for it. It's not artwork. It's an image, which I guess in many cases would be CGI or might be models here. It has the name of the ship. It tells what side they're on, in this case, unaligned ship, as these say. It has actually the title of the specific ship in some form underneath. So you have two different variants of ways to refer to it here, which is interesting. Then this symbol here, that's going to be your trade symbol, as one would surmise. There is some nice flavor text underneath, which is not something we get with Star Realms base cards here. You then have your little set symbol with some numbers to help you sort them, which is nice. The copyright date underneath. But notice it's basically just the Scout lifted to be the Scout ship. We'll look at these three more closely here in just a second. The Viper has become the Raider, which is a Maquis Raider, right, from that particular era of sort of late Next Generation and then DS9 heading into Voyager. And then we have the Explorer replaced by the Decora class Ferengi Marauder. So we got our combat symbol here that you can see. It went from being sort of the target looking thing to basically just sort of an enclosed hexagon. We'll look at it more closely in just a second. And then the scrap icon is on the cards where it is necessary, but you'll notice here it's sort of a much, much darker, honestly harder to see trashing or scrapping icon here. And the cost up in the corner is essentially just its version of the trade value. So more closely here, see we have the Regillian Scout, the Raider, and the Decora class. And see, so there's your symbol there, kind of an edge to it to make it look a little 3D-esque. It looks a little bit different than the one, of course, that we see with Star Realms, base Star Realms. And there's that kind of spiky edge around the hex symbol for combat. And that's the scrapping symbol there that looks, you know, like a trash can with the lid on it, but it's a lot darker, especially against this particular background. Now you may notice here a pretty substantial size stack here, for instance, for the Scout ship. That is because, as you would expect, this core box, being something that's designed for 2 to 4 players, has 4 players worth of Scout ships and Raiders. So instead of 16, as in the original 2-player starter for Star Realms, you get 32 Scout ships, you get 8 Raiders instead of just 4, and the Decora class, you still just get 10 of those, just like the 10 Explorers in the original base game for Star Realms. So let's start digging into some comparisons here. We will start with the blue faction this time. It was, of course, the Trade Federation in Star Realms. It is the United Federation of Planets, as you might have surmised, in Star Trek Star Realms. These are going to be location cards, as they call them here, as opposed to referring to them as bases, although there is still the whole outpost aspect. So we have here the Deep Space Station Federation location, so it'll have a name, it'll have the faction, and whether it's a location or whatever. We have the actual name again of whatever it is, in this case Deep Space 5. There's going to be a faction symbol up in the corner, as we saw with Star Realms, in this case the UFP symbol there. You then have your cost in the corner again. You have your abilities and whatnot, scrap ability, symbol with the numbers again, copyright. But then down here in the corner, all these symbols are a little bit smaller here. You'll notice you have this sort of red shield symbol. They refer to the shield as a defense symbol, and if they are red, that makes it an outpost, playing by the same outpost rules from Star Realms. But notice it doesn't say outpost anywhere. It's just the fact that it's red that's the indicator, whereas in Star Realms, of course, it's black to be an outpost here. There's your authority symbol. Looks pretty similar to what we saw with Star Realms. It's got a white number instead of black, but pretty similar here. So One thing I find interesting about these is you'll notice here, there's 2 copies of Trading Post in Star Realms, right? So there'll be 2 copies of Deep Space Station in Star Trek Star Realms. But notice, even though the abilities, cost, and everything else is the same across these 2 copies of Deep Space Station, the reason why you're going to see this name down here is that when you start getting into the actual factions, the images and the specific name of the particular item may be different. In fact, most of the time it will be different, despite it actually being technically the same card. So here, Station K7, right? I believe that's Trouble with Tribbles Station there, and Deep Space 5. They're both Deep Space Station. They both do exactly the same thing. They are effectively the same card for gameplay purposes. But they've taken that extra step, which I really appreciate, to differentiate the art and the specific version of whatever it is. I think that's pretty cool. So the equivalent of Barter World is going to be United Federation of Planets HQ. Again, same type of things. But if you look down here, 24-593 Federation Drive, San Francisco, California, Earth. Whereas here, UFP Headquarters, USS Federation, NCC 325002. If I'm not seeing things here, is that not the Federation Headquarters in the future of Discovery? Most of this stuff tends to be stuff from the Next Generation DS9 Voyager, even Picard era, but there is some stuff that goes a bit far afield. Then we have 1 copy of Defense Center, therefore 1 copy of Daystrom Station, Daystrom Institute Black Site, of course, from Picard. Then for Port of Call, we have Space Dock. What else could it be? Starbase 74. Then for Central Office, we have Utopia Planitia Fleet Yards, Mars Sol System. And you notice here, because this is not an outpost, it's just a regular location or base in Star Realms terms, it does have a gray shield rather than red. But again, the symbols tend to be a little bit smaller, in some cases a little bit tougher to read against the gray background, at least that scrap symbol there, but working essentially the same way, right? So in this case, Defense Center, right, you play it, you get the 3 authority or the 2 combat. It is an outpost with a value here, a defense value of 5. It costs 5 to purchase it in the first place. But if you play another card that is Federation, you get that 2 combat bonus here. These are set up the same way. Same game effects and everything, laid out a little differently. No outpost name, different color there, slightly different symbols here, of course. But then, just as before with Star Realms, you have the faction symbol to indicate when you get those faction abilities. So very, very similar with kind of just a new coat of paint. As to the Federation ships, we have our equivalents here, just running through here. The Federation shuttle is now the Danube class, the runabout. The cutter is now the Oberth class. The embassy yacht is now the Wallenberg class. The freighter is now the Miranda class. The trade escort is now the Defiant class. The flagship is now the Nebula class. And the command ship is now the Galaxy class. So we have our Danube class here. Again, 3 different named runabouts there. We have the Oberth class, again giving us 3 different ones. Different eras, even in this case. 2 for Wallenberg. 2 for Miranda. I was wondering if they would actually wind up using the Reliant, and sure enough, they did, despite it being a very different era. Then 1 each here. We, of course, have the Defiant class, but interestingly, the Valiant for the Defiant class. The Sutherland here for the Nebula class. And then again, of course, the Enterprise D for the Galaxy class. And again, layout is essentially the same, just vertical here, faction symbol, name, type, in this case Federation ship, cost, name of the specific one pictured, abilities, maybe some faction bonus stuff you get there, your flavor text here, legalese, and your number. I will note, though, that sometimes you do run into small differences in the wording here. And pardon my printing here, it's kind of a crappy printing of the original set. I actually have a replacement set on the way. I didn't realize how crappy it was because I've mostly been playing with the later sets here. But notice here for the command ship, it's 4 authority, 5 combat, draw 2 cards, and if you play Federation cards, you may destroy target base. Notice it says may. Here, draw 2 cards, destroy target location. The word may has been removed. Now, for what it's worth, that is because the rules specifically state that once an ally ability is triggered, you may use it at any point during the main phase. So the may is kind of built into the way that the rules are worded, but many cards do still say may in many cases. The Miranda, for example, you may put the next ship you acquire this turn on top of your deck. Well, if may is inherent in the rules, why does it need to say may? This one sure doesn't. The other one that has a substantial color change is yellow to purple as we go from the Star Empire in Star Realms to the Dominion in Star Trek Star Realms. Here, our equivalents here are Recycling Station with Dominion shipyards, Space Station with Nor-type station, War World with Sokara Base, Royal Redoubt with Ketracel White Facility, and Fleet HQ with the Great Link. Notice here, this is one of those reasons why it's locations, not bases. Some of these are going to be planets, some are places on planets, and yeah, some of them are space stations, but certainly not all of them. So let's look at these. Our Dominion shipyards, 2 copies, as one would expect based on Recycling Station. So we have Monarch 4 yards and Kelvis 5 facility. Then we have 2 also of Nor-type station for Space Station there. We have Empok Nor and Sintok Nor. Then the other ones are just 1 of each. So Kara Base, Ketracel White Facility, and the Great Link. Though notice here, these don't have any specific names because essentially those are the specific names. You'll notice a difference here, by the way, with the Great Link and Fleet Headquarters. Fleet Headquarters, all of your ships get +1 combat. The Great Link, whenever you play a ship, gain 1 combat. Probably because the idea is that your combat is a pool that is just for you, it's not for the specific ships per se, but is a wording change that might eventually have very slight ramifications. Then we have our Dominion ships, and again, it's a nice mixture here. I find it interesting that the way that they did the Dominion was to go with sort of the Dominion once they're kind of building up, so it also includes Cardassian ships, for example, rather than giving the Cardassians their own faction. So the equivalents here of what the Star Empire has for the Imperial Fighter, Corvette, Imperial Frigate, Survey Ship, Battlecruiser, and Dreadnought are, respectively, a Jem'Hadar attack ship, a Chel-Gret class, a Galler class, a Gromal class, a Jem'Hadar battlecruiser, barely enough room for that title, and a Dominion battleship. All abilities and stuff the same as you would expect. So 3 copies of Jem'Hadar battleship. We have Wei Yun's attack ship, cool. Robinson and Talak Talan's attack ship. I feel like I'm going to say some of these wrong because it's been a long time since I actually watched the entirety of the Trek saga and finally got a chance to go through all of this era. So we have the Braktak Gall and the Tick for the Chel-Gret class. For the Galler class, that was 2 of those. The Galler class, we have the CDS Krakson, the CDS Prakesh, and the CDS Reklar. For the Gromal class, we have the CDS Gromal, fitting, the Drilga, and the Karun. For the Jem'Hadar battlecruiser, we just have Dukat's battlecruiser. A-hole. Then we have the Dominion battleship, Red Guard's Quarry. For Red, the Machine Cult in Star Realms, the equivalent is going to be, probably unsurprisingly because of the color scheme, the Klingons. So for Battle Station, we have Planetary Outpost, Mech World becomes Beacon of Kahless, Junkyard becomes Penal Colony, Machine Base becomes Taiga Core Station, and then Brain World becomes Hall of Warriors. Another of these that, by definition, is a part of another location, so it makes sense to call it a location, not a base. So we have a couple copies here of Planetary Outpost. We have Narendra 3 and Kittimer, Beacon of Kahless. Nothing underneath, it's just Beacon of Kahless. Again, kind of interesting that they're working in some discovery here. Penal Colony. Where else could it be but Trek 6's Rurapenthe? Tigor Station is just its own name, so nothing here. And Hall of Warriors, also no subname. Then getting into the Klingon ships, we have our equivalent here of the Trade Bot, which is the D5 class cruiser. For Missile Bot, it's the D7 class cruiser. For the Supply Bot, the Katinga battle cruiser. For the Patrol Mech, the Bird of Prey, classic. For the Stealth Needle, we have the prototype Bird of Prey. We have Battle Mech here transformed into the Vorcha class, and then Missile Mech turned into the Nengvar class. So from the Enterprise era with the D5 class here, we have Mag's cruiser, Krell's cruiser, and the IKS Bortas. For the D7, we have the IKS Devisor, the IKS Geroth, and the Vokling. For the Katingas, we have the Amar, the Taong, and Kronos 1. For the Birds of Prey, we have the Toril and the Akrona. The prototype Need No Name. The Vorcha here is the Mat'a, and the Nengvar is the Nengvar. Then taking up the mantle as the green faction, I'm told it is not easy being green. For the Blobs, we have the Blob Wheel, the Hive, and Blob World, but for the Romulans in Star Trek Star Realms, we have the Romulan Neutral Zone, the Hall of State, and the Artifact, and kind of going into that Picard era. I guess it was around before the Picard era, technically, but that's where we actually got to know it. So, Romulan Neutral Zone, we have art here with no subtitle, but even though there is no subtitle, we do still have different art each time, which I can appreciate. Then the Hall of State actually has Romulan Senate Chamber, and the Artifact actually has Borg Artifact Research Institute. And one thing I do want to point out that's a little weird, I guess it's maybe just a difference between companies and all, is that the reverses are reversed, basically. So I'm going to take each one of these and just fold it down this way, or turn it, flip it down this way, top to bottom. Notice there that they're facing opposite directions, so when they're in your decks, like so, again, they're oriented opposite directions. But this, by the way, is the back of all the cards. Now, we'll do 2 rounds of ships here for the Romulans because, again, they don't have as many locations, so they have more different varieties of ships. So we have the Mothership with the equivalent of the Mogai class. I know I'm going in the opposite direction here. We have the Battle Blob with the Dalkina class, if I'm saying that correctly. It's been a while. Blob Carrier for the Dederidex class. Blob Destroyer, the Diavectau class. So our 2 Diavectau are going to be Coppelius Fleet and Red Lady. And then for Dederidex, we just have the 1, the RIS Devorus. For the Dalkina, we have General Nadar's Warbird. For the Mogai, we have the Valdor, or Valdori, I guess it's Valdor. Again, apologies, been a while. Then our last 4 for the Romulans and for the game itself. We have the equivalents for the Blobs of the Blob Fighter, Battle Pod, Trade Pod, and Ram, which are the Landra class, the Vashatham class, the D7 Stormbird class, and the Talis Refit. So for the Landra class, we have Deseve's Scout, Pi or P1, again, I really don't remember that one, and the Vo. Then for the Vashatham, we have Galgathong, Bloodwing, and Mamenda. For the Stormbird, we have the Gladiator, the Red Talon, and then for the Talis Refit, we have Karkentar's Bird of Prey, and Vrennik. So there you are. If you're one of the people playing this game, your side of the board may look something like this. Your deck, maybe no discard pile because you just shuffled it here. Your hand made up of things that might be from your starting deck, might be from purchases here. You've got your trade row out here of 5 cards. You're always available Decora class Ferengi Marauders over here. Your trade deck, your scrap pile there, and you might have some locations out in play. And then, of course, your authority, basically your health. You're 36 in this particular player's case. With a nice handy turn phase here. And I gotta say, I feel like in some cases I'm kind of ragging on this game. I really do like the idea of the reskin. I wish they had done more with it. I wish they had included solo or cooperative challenges like they did in the later box set for Star Realms. I wish that the board was a board, not just a cardstock fold out here as a mat, but they do call it a mat, not a board, so at least you know that going into it. And I gotta say, as much as I think the design of the cards is a little less vibrant, it doesn't pop as much as Star Realms does, I appreciate the fact that as a Star Trek fan, I recognize a lot of these ships. If there's one thing that has always kept me from enjoying Star Realms as much as I enjoy its sister game, Hero Realms, aside from just Hero Realms having more cooperative and solo play available, which is how I usually like to play, it's the fact that with all those Star Realms ships, without a whole lot of context or storytelling in that universe, they all to me feel very generic. Yeah, they fit a theme for the faction, but just kind of a generic spaceship theme. They don't feel like they pop with personality unless I've got, the heroes or maybe the command decks in play to at least have some human or alien faces to go along with my side of the conflict. Here, you don't have any faces. It's all just locations and ships. So in that sense, a step down, no heroes to speak of in this version. But again, there weren't any in the original version of Star Realms either. But because these ships are recognizable to fans of Star Trek, that gives them a personality and an investment emotionally that otherwise the game probably would not have. Such that even though it's all just basically screenshot type images, it works. So if you're someone who is into Star Trek and into deck building games, this might be one to pick up. If you're already into Star Realms and you just want to play a Star Trek themed version of Star Realms, go for it. Star Realms is going to have a heck of a lot more depth because of the sheer library of cards and different packs that are all modular that have been released for that game. There's no way Star Trek Star Realms will ever be able to match that level of variability. But if you're just looking for a quick game, essentially the same as grabbing your starter box of Star Realms, this one's not quite as compact to carry around, but it does give you that same experience right there in the box, and unlike the original core box of Star Realms, does play up to 4 players rather than just 2. It does only play up to 4, but the game variants included do go up to 6. Just no solo. So there you have it, a comprehensive look at Star Trek Star Realms, the Star Trek reskin of the original Star Realms base game from UVS Games. Due, again, at retail in late September 2024, assuming you're watching this before it's actually released. You can find some of these out there from Gen Con, but usually for an inflated price, so at this point, you might as well stick around for retail. There were no exclusives in the Gen Con copies. I hope this was useful. Thanks for watching, and live long and prosper. And here's hoping this game causes them to prosper so they put out more varied content, perhaps not just reskinning Star Realms content, but maybe even making command decks of their own and really kind of branching out. We'll see. I'm skeptical, but we'll see.